Hey, welcome back to the Bible for Everyone. We're going to start a series on the book of Romans, and this is the introductory session. I'm going to go over some very basic things to understand before we dive right in. So the first thing, of course, is the author, Paul, the apostle. Basically, no real scholarship disputes this. It's widely accepted, even by liberal scholarship, that Paul did indeed write the book of Romans. Now, he wrote it around 56 to 57 AD. If you see me look away, it's because I have my notes in front of me. By the way, the notes or a link to them will be down below. And so, why is Paul writing the book of Romans? First, we have to ask about what is the church in Rome that he is writing to? Where did it come from? What's it like? That's really one of the big questions in understanding this book. Where did the church in Rome come from? There's kind of two main theories. The first one is that Jews present on the day of Pentecost, and who got saved on the day of Pentecost, part of the 3,000 who were saved that day, wound up back in Rome for one reason or another, and so they gathered together and formed a church. The other theory is that some of Paul's converts from places in Macedonia and such could have moved to Rome and started church there. Either way, these were believers who were kind of on their own. They didn't have a lot of apostolic interaction and a lot of apostolic teaching. And so there was a definite lack of doctrine for them. They were saved, they were filled with the Spirit, but, they didn't have any New Testament scripture, of course, because it was still being written. And they didn't have a whole lot of interaction with any of the leadership of the church. And so another thing that we have to understand about the church at Rome is its makeup. So obviously, either way that it began, its makeup was predominantly Jewish to begin with. So in the late 30s, early 40s AD, it would have been Jewish believers with Jewish leadership meeting in Jewish homes. And that's how it was. I'm sure they made a few Gentile converts, just as they went about their lives. But predominantly, it would be Jewish converts because predominantly the Jews would have known other Jews. Around 49 AD, there was an expulsion of Jews from Rome. It's a little bit unclear exactly why it happened, but for whatever reason, about 40,000 Jews were expelled from Rome. Now you can imagine that when this happened, suddenly the predominantly Jewish church in Rome became predominantly Gentile. The Jewish leaders were expelled, the Jewish believers were expelled, they didn't have Jewish homes to meet in. And so now it was Gentile believers meeting in Gentile homes with Gentile leadership. And it remained that way for a good 5 years or so. It wasn't until about 54 AD that the Jews were welcomed back to Rome. When they are, you can now imagine, for 5 years, Gentile believers have met in Gentile homes with Gentile leaders, and they've grown a Gentile church. And now the Jewish leaders and Jewish believers return to Rome and want to meet in the Jewish homes again with Jewish leadership. Now there's kind of a struggle. I mean, maybe not a terrible overt one, but obviously there are questions about, well, who should be the leader now? What homes should we meet in? Should we segregate Jew and Gentile? Should we gather together? Do we need two separate churches? Are we part of one church? And it's into this context that Paul is writing. And so Paul's got a few purposes in mind when he's writing. The first is he wants to introduce himself because he intends to go to Rome and set up a base there from which he can make a missionary trip to Spain, the furthest west reach of the Roman Empire at that time. And so he wants to introduce himself and kind of prepare the way. The second thing is he wants to address the problems that he's heard of about Jewish and Gentile believers in Rome. To do that, he wants to theologically explain the elements of the gospel that relate to how Jews and Gentiles are saved and declared righteous. He wants to explain, secondly, the place of ethnic Israel in the plan of God at this point. And finally, he wants to give instructions as to how Jews and Gentiles can coexist in one body without strife. And so in light of this, if you think of Romans 9 through 11, they are actually the climax of the book. They are not a parenthesis like so many Bible teachers will tell you. Rather than being a strange parenthesis in the middle of a book that's rather generic, they're actually the climax of a book that's explaining to a mixed Jew and Gentile community how they can live together as one, how the gospel relates to them together as one, and what God's plan for ethnic Israel is. It might also be helpful to point out that Romans is not a general epistle. It's not just a, hi, how you doing? Hope things are going well. Here's some encouragement kind of epistle. And number two, it is not Paul's systematic theology. He's not pulling together all the pieces of everything and trying to lay them out in one place. He's addressing a very specific situation, a very specific problem, and therefore, he doesn't reference eschatology hardly at all. He doesn't reference Christology hardly at all. This is simply addressing the Jewish and Gentile issue within the church at Rome. If you look in the notes that I've provided, I've got a basic outline of the book of Romans that you might find helpful. Finally, I'll say that the most helpful thing you can do if you want to understand this book is to read it start to finish multiple times. It's only 15 chapters. It's not that long of a read. If you sit down and read it through from start to finish multiple times over multiple weeks, it will do you a world of good. Even better, if you can, use some Bible software on the computer and cut and paste it into a Word document or a Google Docs document, whatever you use, and take out the verse numbers and the chapter numbers and the headings and read it like it was written, a letter to be read start to finish, with no chapter breaks, they were inserted later, with no verse numbers, they were inserted later, with no headings, they were inserted by the translators. And just read it that way, start to finish, over and over. And I promise you will gain great understanding through that alone. In coming sessions, we'll start diving into Romans 1:1 and go from there. We'll see how far we get each time. I'm going to try to keep these to 10 minutes or so, and we'll see where we get to. Thanks.